Welcome out to another episode of It's All One Trek Report. This time, the wounded. Ooh, ouch! No, I don't mean to diminish it. It's the wounded on It's All One Trek Report. Something else I do not want to diminish is the Patreon. Become a Patreon member. Patreon.com/IABD. Not only do you get to see the video of our of this very podcast and our special episode, but you get the whole IABD Presents.com network. It's all been done radio hour. You get all those bonus things as well. Become a member. Check it out. Very affordable. It's less than the cost of a half a cup of coffee out of a machine. Anyway, you can support us that affordably, and you get great things like this, The Wounded, on It's All Been Trekked Before.
Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Trekked Before. Your regular hosts are here.
This is Steven.
And the pickled Keith.
Jimmy-Jerome. Keith is drinking pickled vodka, for those of you who didn't understand his reference. And of course, why would you? Because we talked about it before we started the episode. I feel obligated to explain, Keith, because when you throw those things in, nobody knows what you're talking about.
Are you really that careful to cut everything off like right before? I guess
I start with the welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Trekked Before. That's where it starts.
It's now a copyrighted feature of this broadcast.
Yeah.
Right.
It's explaining what happened before we came up.
It's really easy to find where I go, welcome out, because it's louder. Anyway. So we're here to talk The Wounded.
Did you just make it harder for yourself when you said that just then?
Yep. First impressions.
I was excited for. I mean, as soon as I heard that there were Cardassians in it, or they at least they started talking about them, I was immediately interested in seeing where this is going to go. So there's that, and I don't think I felt disappointed overall. There are a couple of conclusions I make at the end of things that kind of bothered me. Some of that has to do with current events, but that's it for now.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much I like it. I definitely liked it. I've talked a lot about the episodes where it's like, oh, what's the mystery? And they drag it out, and then the mystery's not that great. And I thought this was one where it's like, well, what is the deal with this guy? And then I thought the payoff was going to be better than it was, but I think I'm still processing how good that payoff was, because I thought the ending was really good, and just the whole intrigue's not the right word, but the things that these guys have to do to maintain the peace.
The politics of it all.
Yeah, and we'll get into all that. But yeah, I did like it a lot.
Yeah, I thought this episode was extraordinarily strong. I did not expect that going in, so it was a pleasant surprise. I don't think I've ever seen this episode.
No, why didn't you expect it?
I don't think it was called The Wounded. That doesn't strike me as a title that's going to be that exciting. And while there are some really good Cardassian stories, Next Gen, when it first introduces new villains, like the Ferengi, tends to not do it strongly. So I wasn't super confident in its first Cardassian story. I also just the general, just seeing the image and the stupid headgear the Cardassian was wearing, which they don't wear later.
Oh, really?
Okay. No, that's not a thing they wear. So that bothered me. And so I was like, oh, this is going to be lackluster. That's fine. And then I was like, wow, no, this is a really good episode. I'm really into it. And it was very TOS-y in a good way. I wrote a number of notes of comparing it to TOS stuff, but maybe the next evolution of what TOS was doing. So I thought it was very, very good. We start on the Cardassian border, and we're told that this is a species the Federation was at war with, but they've been at peace for about a year. And so I guess we've got yet another neutral zone. You know, with the Klingons and the Romulans and the Cardassians are kind of surrounded by the bad guys. Mm-hmm. They need to do some exposition, and they choose to do it by Picard telling them this goofy little story about when he was on the Stargazer and fought the Cardassians. And it might have been one of my least favorite scenes of the episode. Like, I get it, it's kind of charming. Patrick Stewart's kind of charming, but it felt a little bit clunky to me.
I think the only time that I can recall where Patrick Stewart, I guess, failed to make something charming was the Picard Squared or whatever. Was that what it was?
Yeah, the two Picards.
Yeah.
Time Squared.
Time Squared, right. Everything else, I think he's made it work. But yeah, I see your point.
From that scene, we go to the O'Brien household. I'm going to just call it the O'Brien household because Keiko does take his name, and from here on out we call her Keiko O'Brien, where she has made them a breakfast of seaweed and rice, which apparently is what she ate every morning.
That sounds great, honestly, but
I was totally with O'Brien. I thought it sounded disgusting. And
what? It's like sushi without the fish.
I don't eat sushi. I've never had sushi, so I would be disappointed if that was my breakfast.
Yeah, I had many thoughts. One, this scene made me hungry. I thought this never came up before in all their courtship. This goes back to our conversation last week. Like,
that was my note. That was it.
I get that it's a trope of, oh well, once you get married and the wife's got to start cooking, which is also jive. But I guess maybe it wasn't jive as much in 1990, but it was for me. But
I mean, because O'Brien cooks later in the episode, so I didn't take it as the wife has to cook.
No, I didn't think that. I thought it was an allusion to that, though, that, when a couple gets together, well, there's going to be that, is she a good enough cook kind of thing? And so at first, that's kind of the way I took it. And I had the same reaction as you, Jimmy. I was like, there's Japanese food I like, and that's not it. And I haven't 23 to meet myself, but I think most of my ancestors are from the British Isles, more or less.
But not Japan, you're saying? Not
Japan. And so everything, when he was talking about it, I'm like, yeah, that sounds. And when he served his food later, I'm like, I'm getting hungry now.
Yeah.
And again, that's because I'm, in theory, me and O'Brien share the same ancestral lines. But yeah, I'm not specifically a sushi fan, but there's other Japanese food that I'm completely on board for.
I did think just serving a little bowl of scalloped potatoes as the meal was a little bit I feel like there should have been some red meat, as he likes to say, along with it.
She asked what the little bits are.
Those were capers.
Capers, that's what it was. Yeah, that's what.
Which I do not like and would have left out.
I'm not sure that the idea of making the wife cook necessarily, or that's what occurred to me in that first scene, but I was definitely focused on the idea that it seemed like a strange interaction to be having for what seemed like the first time.
Right.
After this, during the dating, you can't tell me that there wasn't some shared meal where this topic came up.
But they use replicators on the Enterprise all the time. And when you go to the replicator, you pick what you want. She picks what she wants. I feel like maybe this was just something they were trying after the wedding, of sharing a meal that one of them chose.
Maybe
that's why they got cold feet.
No, I can see your point, Keith, where maybe they would have introduced each other to food before this, but if food's not an important thing to them, I could see it being easily put off with the replicator technology. It's almost like you're going out to eat every time, even if you're in your quarters.
So what if, all right, so did they ever specify how long they had been dating before they got married?
Nope.
This was also where I started getting the feeling of dread about Keiko, because also like last week, but it's like, this is the Spielbergian moment at the beginning of the movie where it's like, this is a great family. Now we're going to do terrible things to them for the next hour and a half. Well, you want to make sure you feel attached to them. So I felt a lot of dread, but I was happily Keiko survived. So
I've already spoiled that she's going to be in a bunch of episodes.
Right.
If I had not spoiled that after these two, would you start to feel comfortable, or would you still be feeling that the next couple?
By the end of this episode, I felt good.
Okay. Then I'm glad I didn't spoil it till after you were feeling good.
Because I thought it was going to be like a Wrath of Khan Search for Spock, which we talked about, where, hey, I got a wife. Hey, she's dead.
She's dead. No. Yeah. No, thankfully, they're a happy couple.
So, the point that I alluded to last episode was that this feels like something that should have happened before we saw them get married, at least. Yeah. Whether or not this was second, third, fifth, whatever date, it feels like something that should have been examined, at least for the audience's benefit, before they got married, to make them care about the union.
Yeah, and like, this is something that could have come up last episode where they're arguing over what's going to be served at the wedding. Reception.
Those are all good points. I still bought it as a post-wedding scene. That was just something they hadn't covered in their dating. But those, I get your viewpoint on that as well. I did like the interaction, though. It made them feel more coupley in a way than they had it last week.
Yeah, I didn't like the specific thing I didn't like, but the two of them, it felt like they were a couple and everything. But word to all you single folks out there, all you quarters out there listening, talk about food now. Don't wait till you get married.
So I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but does that mean Keiko O'Brien's not your annoyance this week?
She is not. No.
Okay, good. They. You had both of them as a couple.
Yeah, there's only one.
I won't ask you who it is. I was
looking at my notes later, and I got them flip flop. No, but they are not.
So, what'd you think of the design of the Cardassian ship? as it showed up.
I thought you were going to say, what do you think of the fashion of the Cardassians?
We can talk about that too.
Yeah. I liked their ship. It wasn't great. Was it glowing golden?
It is a golden color. All their ships are golden.
All right.
And it's a cool, I think it's an interesting design. It reminds me of some type of sea creature. It's very front heavy, round and big in the front, and then skinny tail, which don't think we see a lot of races with that kind of design. So it's unique alien race in Star Trek. They're consistent with that design for the rest of the 24th century shows here. I thought it was a cool design. I liked it.
Or the Borg,
that's their ship.
Yep.
So the fashion, on the other hand, their uniforms and their face gear are not the uniforms that they wear normally, and they don't normally wear the face gear after this.
Yes, because I was like, what is on their heads? It looked like an old football helmet.
I didn't like it.
An original 1890 when people were getting killed playing football.
Okay, but the forehead is exposed, like completely exposed. So you got the eyes exposed, the forehead and everything. It's just covering like the bridge of the nose and maybe the center ridge on their forehead.
So you can't punch them in the nose and break it.
I guess.
It's like, it works like one of those breathe right strips.
Yeah.
That's how they breathe. They breathe better with that. They were interesting looking. I thought the makeup was really good.
Yeah.
Those uniforms got to be sweaty and smelly, which would go the other way. They shouldn't be able to breathe better. Maybe that thing presses down and suppresses their sense of smell.
So they don't have to smell each other.
Yeah, and I thought the main guy, his hair goatee was terrible.
Oh,
yeah. I don't think we ever see hair on a Cardassian face like that again.
Yeah,
I think the makeup is pretty consistent with what they do later, but the uniforms, I think if you just saw the outline of the uniform, like the profile, that's similar to what they have later, but the design is totally different.
I really like the makeup.
Different.
Yeah, and I like the way it went. Like they kept doing the side shot of the one guy, the guy that O'Brien was having the conversation with in 10 Forward. And his all the way through the neck and everything. I was like, I mean, it's still a humanoid kind of look, but I liked it.
I will say that, I mean, the current generation of Star Trek notwithstanding, I think every time we go back to this series, that it holds it pretty well for the rest of that section of time.
Yeah.
In the various things. I love the way the Klingons look, the way the Cardassians look, everything. Just Ferengi even. Yeah.
I do want to talk about the actors playing the three Cardassians. So the one O'Brien was talking to in the bar, Glenn Darrow, was played by Time Winters.
Yeah, what a name.
Best known for Sneakers, The Runaways, Thinner. He's got 159 IMDb credits.
Yeah.
The Runaways, like the band, that one, or
the Runaways, with Kristen Stewart.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's got a ton of credits,
but not Superwoman.
Just 159 credits, this guy.
You could just 130 something the other woman though from last episode. I was like, only 135.
Now he's got 2021 credits. He's still very active. The one who got in trouble for looking at things, Glenn Tell, was played by Marco Rodriguez, who is best known for Cobra, The Crow, A Man Apart, and The Rookie. He also has 130 credits. Also some in 2021, still acting. He was in Inhumans, the really bad Marvel television series.
I finished that eventually, I think.
Sorry.
One of his credits was in the English Patient episode of Seinfeld. He played one of the Cubans.
Guillermo.
Yeah.
Oh, the cigars and everything.
Mm-hmm.
This is also his second episode of Trek. Way back in season 1, he played Captain Paul Rice in the Arsenal of Freedom. You probably don't remember him. He was a human. But yeah,
I don't remember anything about that. The episode, the title, just nothing.
Also, if you remember, they wrapped the crepes too tight, and that the end of that Seinfeld episode.
Right.
And there were several people were burned very badly.
So the final Cardassian, the leader Gul Masat, was played by Mark Alamo, and this is his third episode of Next Gen. He played two different characters in two previous episodes. The Neutral Zone, he played a Romulan, and he was in Lonely Among Us as another alien. And he'll be in Time's Arrow coming up as a human. So he has 4 different characters in Next Gen.
Wow.
But what he is best known for to me, and I'm pretty disappointed that this is not what he's best known for on IMDb, is he plays Dukat in Deep Space Nine, who is a Cardassian, but he is the main Cardassian antagonist for Deep Space Nine. And he was in so many episodes of DS9, a major reoccurring character from the series premiere all the way to the series finale.
That's probably who I mentally picture, actually, when I think of Cardassians from that series.
Dukat,
I love his facial expressions throughout, like every time you see him, just that condescending kind of scheming face. It's just love it.
I think it's so interesting that we have Mark Alamo playing our Cardassian here and then being the main Cardassian DS9, when we also have had several Ferengis in Next Gen be the main Ferengis in DS9. Mm-hmm. Different characters, but the same actors. So clearly they pigeonholed these actors in a certain alien species and then brought them back more.
Do you think that was a bad thing, the way you're putting that?
No, not necessarily a bad thing. Maybe as an actor you want more of a range, but I guess it's nice that the casting people were like, hey, we really liked these people as Ferengi and Cardassians. Let's give them larger Ferengi and Cardassian roles. Mm-hmm. Though it's a little bit of shame that they're all new roles in DS9 and they don't reprise any of these roles that they played originally.
I can kind of see that both ways. I mean, foremost, I would like to think of it as being a compliment of sorts, that they have sort of pioneered the interpretation of what that would be. Mm-hmm. They've got this down. They're able to jump off of that and go forward without having to be necessarily constrained by this other character that was introduced in a certain way that might not be useful for going forward. But
that's true. I mean, Dukat is quite different from Masset, and the Ferengis, Quark and Rom, are quite different from the Ferengis we met already. Mark Alamo is also best known for Total Recall, Tango and Cash, and Naked Gun 33 1/3, and Hill Street Blues. So he's had other work besides, and he has a 2020 credit, although he hasn't worked in a while, it looks like.
While we're talking Cardassians, and we've also often called them Kardashians on accident.
I haven't, but...
And I have. I finally did the research on them. So
the Kardashians.
So this was before Kardashian became a national name from the OJ trial.
Makes sense.
So Jerry Taylor, the writer, realized her original name for the species, Circassian, was a real ethnic group from the Caucasus region of Asia near Turkey. So
wow.
The name by playing with the sounds. Interestingly enough, their surname Kardashian is Turkish or Armenian in origin.
You did it yourself.
I did.
You are right. This episode was teleplay by Jerry Taylor, who we've talked about at length, but story by Stuart Charno, Sarah B. Cooper, and Cy Chermak. And these three people don't have any other Trek credits between them, but they're all producers and writers for other television shows. Cy Chermak worked on Chips, Barbary Coast, Kolchak, Ironsides. Sarah B. Cooper worked on Lara Croft. She wrote Lara Croft Tomb Raider, the film. She was a producer on House and Homicide: Life on the Street and Continuum more recently. And then Stuart Charno was an actor in Friday the 13th Part 2, Christine, One of the Guys, Chicago Hope. So they're all three in the industry. Not sure. I didn't do any research to see what brought them together to pitch this story that then they had Jerry Taylor rewrite. But I mentioned
reality
before,
show.
I mentioned before, Jerry Taylor's really good with like the emotional character interactions. And I think we see a bunch of moments in this episode between O'Brien and Keiko and O'Brien and Maxwell that are classic Jerry Taylor hallmarks. The episode was directed by Chip Chalmers, one of our regular directors. The mystery, or whatever, the main plot here is they're hunting the USS Phoenix and Captain Ben Maxwell, who is attacking Cardassians for an unknown reason. And that reminded me of original series where we'd have these rogue captains that would, go crazy or go off. I appreciated that wasn't the ultimate conclusion of this, but that made me feel like it was an original series episode there.
Yeah. I was trying to think if there's a movie or I feel like there's some other stuff where Dr. Strangelove has a similar thing, even though the guy hasn't gone crazy, but they've got the one bomber they have to stop and they can't get a hold of him and they're kind of off running on their own. I was trying to think if I feel like one of those submarine movies has
Red October. Was that the Hunt for Red October? Did that happen?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because Red October, he's turning, right? Yeah. So
I don't. There's so many. I've forgotten so much about that and the.
I just watched it because Gates McFadden was in it for.
Well, I mean, was the premise that they were trying to stop someone who didn't know the war was over before they did something bad, or just?
It was just Connery, as the Russian, decides he's got to defect, and so he's doing things he shouldn't be doing. But yeah, I guess it's similar, clearly not the same.
The only thing I remember about that was I loved the device of starting off in Russian, having the subtitles, and then just kind of dissolving it out and going, screw this, you get the idea. Let's go to English. And I think that lots of things should do that, should at least start off and let you understand what is going on. They're not just like inexplicably talking English to each other the entire movie.
That was the thing with Chernobyl. We watched the first episode. We haven't gone back to it, but it was like, okay, these guys are speaking Russians with subtitles. These guys are English actors we know, and they're just like, we're going to speak with a Russian accent. So they mushed it. So I was like, I don't know. Are these guys that are visiting them? Are they? Whatever.
No, so that right there. So there are certain voice acting concepts I've had to kick around for a while, and just the idea of what happens when you get to these scripts and you have these people who are supposed to be. Supposed to be taking place all in this other country, and you get to some movies and the way they try to do it, where you have everyone speaking English but with an accent to each other. And sometimes they adequately explain it, and sometimes they don't. And, sometimes you have like a Disney movie, like one I usually come back to is Aladdin. And you have the main characters speaking without an accent, and sometimes you go off to these other minor characters who are, the way I like to look at it is they're the equivalent of the country bumpkins from here. So they would have like their equivalent of a country accent. And okay, maybe they should have this kind of thick, stereotypical accent for the region, but that's a longer discussion, obviously.
So you complain that the Cardassians don't have their own language and their own accent?
No. How do we get there?
I'd say they, more than most aliens on Star Trek, just speak perfect English and they don't even worry about it. I'm not sure we ever... DS9 has a lot of Cardassian characters, a lot of Cardassian episodes. I'm not sure we ever hear them speak Cardassian.
Is there a... That's it. All right. That kind of brings it back to Star Trek as a whole. Mm-hmm. The idea that you have different speech patterns to indicate certain kinds of aliens, and you got the Vulcans and Romulans who have a certain kind of thing they do to indicate that we're logic, we're emotionless, we're flat. The Klingons, the whole angry kind of thing that they're doing, but you also actually have like a real outside the show language for Klingon. Yeah, and
that's the only one that's that developed. That's the only one that's that developed for Star Trek. Yeah. We have some Romulan and stuff, but not nearly as well developed as Klingon.
Yeah, I think we've talked about the concept of the universal translator.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I don't know, I think I've read about it in books and stuff, but I don't think it's ever actually said in the series. Like Arena, for example, I think the race that's having the test, I think it's like, you'll be able to understand them, blah, 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 which I think is, again, another way of, the lizard's going to be talking weird, but it's going to sound like your Earth talk, because there's only one language on Earth.
Sorry. If you were to assume that there is a translator at work for most interactions, should we then, are they implementing it correctly for the audience's benefit? Should we be seeing their mouths move? They're just like speaking English.
Right,
or should it be like, da, 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 and it's like...
While there are cases where the translator would come into play, English is Federation standard, and a lot of the other races, the Klingons, the Cardassians, who have to deal with humans, their species learn English. Similar, I feel like, to how a lot of people on Earth right now in other countries that have other primary languages still learn English.
Mm-hmm.
So, not that surprising, I guess, that we just extended that. And to be honest, as unrealistic as that kind of feels, it also makes things so much easier for the television audience and the writers and everything. That's one aspect of Star Trek I've never picked over much. I don't feel the need to.
Also stays with the English system of measurement.
Yeah.
They refuse to adopt the metric system. So galaxy-wide.
They do the metric system.
I'm just kidding.
I was gonna say, no, they do the metric system.
They use metric light years.
Yeah. No, but we hear them say meters and stuff instead of feet. So O'Brien's backstory is something that's never fully defined. That like how he went from being a lieutenant to a chief, and now they're calling him chief, but he's still wearing the lieutenant pips. But I feel like this episode is probably as close as we get, because they talk about how he was the tactical officer under Maxwell, not on the Phoenix, but on a prior starship, and how what happened to him fighting the Cardassians, where Maxwell's family had died, where O'Brien was forced to kill a Cardassian. And you think tactical officer, yeah, you're going to have to kill some people sometimes. But apparently that was the first person he killed. And he didn't like it so much that I guess you can make the easy leap from the story in this episode that that's why he switched to transporter chief and a non-commissioned officer instead of staying in the regular track and the regular rank. And it's a little bit sad, but also a really interesting story. And I like the way that he's not bitter at the Cardassians or bent on revenge. He's more just like, yeah, he reacts a little bit angrily to the one Cardassian at first, and then he makes it up to him and goes and apologizes. But his whole point is, I don't hate you. I just hate what I was because of your species or because of what happened. And he's not holding that speciest grudge, which I like about O'Brien. He's instead looking at it in a very evolved 24th century viewpoint. I wish it was a little more clear that that was the exact career trajectory, but I'm relatively satisfied with this episode explaining why he is where he is, doing what he is doing.
All right. If since we're broaching this, I'm not sure that I bought it necessarily. It felt like he was trying to reconcile his self-image for the purpose of getting past this. And I think that translates to a lot of what goes on current day when it comes to prejudice and xenophobia and lots of other things. And it's a very pretty way of reconciling his character as being a good person. And whether he believes it or not, that's up for debate. But it's the way it's presented in such a way that does allow us to say, okay, I still love O'Brien because of this. But I'll say that regardless, it's a good start for someone to as an example, for someone to process their prejudice and confront it in a way that is constructive. It's like the sort of breakthrough you would come to if you were like in therapy or in a group session or something like that. But it doesn't necessarily mean that he is all the way there. When there's too many examples of what he was doing throughout that episode or saying throughout that episode. The way that he was jumping to defend his captain, for example, and that becomes more complicated by the ending.
I kind of took that as a whole separate thing, the defending the captain.
It is, and it's more like it's a projection of his own interpretation of who the Cardassians are and his own personal experiences. Of the way he's like, they must have been up to something. That is at the root of his understanding of the way his captain was processing things.
See, I took that as he doesn't think they're up to something just because they're Cardassians. He thinks they're up to something because he trusts this man that he followed. And this man says they're up to something. So he says we should listen to this man. He's giving the captain the benefit of the doubt because of his relationship with the captain, not necessarily because of the alien species they're dealing with.
He explicitly said at some point that, I don't know. Stephen?
I feel what you're saying, Keith, because I kind of took it as and I thought the scene at 10-4 with him and the Cardassian was really good, except for his closing line, which I thought was a little too on the nose. But I thought the rest of the scene was good, and I took it as I took everything at that time as a more of a Vietnam War reference, which I think is even more timely now in the sense of if you saw Da 5 Bloods, or the fact that there's a ton of tourism from here to Vietnam prior to the pandemic, obviously. But and in Da 5 Bloods, there's spots where they're drinking with people who fought against them in the Vietnam War. It's kind of the same speech, Keith. It was kind of we weren't here to kill you. We were here to kill the bad guys or whatever, but beyond that, I think anyone who's looked into the Vietnam War at all knows the amount of racism and everything going on there as well. So because it felt like a very PTSD kind of thing. I also thought, to go back to Jimmy's point, I think he probably did kill people. I think that person was the first person he killed by his own hand. Like, I bet he was involved with killing people. And that's kind of, we get into this drone talk of like, well, a drone drop bombs. We didn't do that. I have nothing to do with that. We don't get our hands dirty, quote unquote.
Something I hadn't even thought of. It's more that he was forced to confront the idea of what he would have to do in a situation where he had to see the death.
Not just firing ship phasers. Yeah,
exactly. So I took it as that way as well. But I thought Cole Meany was, and I'm starting to see why you love O'Brien so much, Jimmy, because I just seen glimpses of him so far, and I know everybody loves him. And now we're starting to see. And
according to Lower Decks, he's the most important Starfleet officer in history, right?
That's a great thing to observe. I didn't write this down, but I started thinking about that during this episode, and it's almost like a trope for our series when Jimmy gets excited about O'Brien being in whatever is going on, and up to this point, I would say that I felt that some of that was unearned, but this is me not being in the mindset or not remembering very well what all goes on in Deep Space Nine, the importance of the character there. But this, we've arrived at a point where they're really making him a real character. And as far as Cole Meany, this was a great performance, episode wide. That we finally got to focus on him, and this is great. Aside from the writing or whatever else, he did a great job at what they were presenting or trying to get across here. The note that I had about this is one of the few notes I took during this episode, and this is before I got to the ending. I put, "This is a clean examination of wartime prejudice," which extends to a lot of the current things we're experiencing now with the Asian American hate, police violence for against African Americans. That is a very long discussion to have for other things we probably shouldn't be trying to tackle here. But those are the sorts of things that came to mind while I was watching this. And as I said, it felt like a little too neat for my liking in certain ways. But I think that they kind of saved it when we get to the end for the complexity of what was going on.
And I think it's a very TNG kind of racism, I guess, or whatever. Because, in the original series, we had a couple different times. I'm trying to think. It might even have been Balance of Terror. I'll just keep talking about it, where you've got the navigator who is just losing his mind over Spock. He's essentially that redneck you see in every movie about racism. And it's like, this guy is so over the top. Of course, as we now know in our world, he's not over the top. Those guys are out there, but there are also the guys that are just as racist, but they hide it. And then, but to that point, I think, I don't know that O'Brien's a racist, but he obviously has these strong feelings about this species. Speciesism is going on there on some level, whether it's subconscious, conscious, and otherwise, it's going on. And I think the fact that we can see O'Brien, that we, like you said, this guy we like, wrestling with that, I think it was the thing where Roddenberry was just like, I just want to deal with racism. Whereas at this point, it's like, it's TNG. We want to be 24th century. We want to think that people have gotten past it, but we also want to acknowledge they haven't. And so, and like I said, I think it's it's a very PTSD. I'm saying PTSD, and like I said, I look at it from a Vietnam centric look.
I mean, they do
putting it in 1990.
They do approach it from a very this was war. Yeah. We should have felt this way, or we were made to feel this way because of these circumstances. Right. The thing that's hard to really approach or get across is the idea that when you have these kinds of circumstances, it also gives the people involved an excuse, a reason to, an outlet for exploring hating the other, or being able to just channel all this aggression toward an otherness that they can't quite put away. And some of that is definitely human nature, and they, through Star Trek, you also explore the idea that this is something that would be universal to all sentient life. To confine it to this episode, the reason why I think I need to clarify the use of the word clean is that it is necessarily to contain it within this episode. Certain things were a little neater than they probably would be. The kinds of resolutions, the kinds of revelations that O'Brien had about himself, however long it took him to get here, it's presented in such a way, because we're just discovering it, and then it's put away in such a way. It's like, you know what? This is me. This is my problem to deal with. This is the things that I need to do. And that is something that I don't think we would usually be able to get from a lot of people. And maybe the point of exploring things in this kind of medium is to try to convince people to look at themselves in that way. And, to that end, fine. It's good that we did it this way, but it also, the danger of that, of course, is presenting things in such a way that you can have a very clean solution to them, to these kinds of issues and self-examinations.
Yeah. Well, and then I think with Maxwell, we get into a not as clean situation, because I think the whole episode we're like, oh, this guy's angry at the Cardassians because they killed his family, and he is. But then it ends up being revealed, well, he also is a good general, whatever, captain or whatever. But I also
he was a good wartime captain. He doesn't know how to handle peace, which again reminded me of TOS stuff.
Oh, it makes me think of Godfather. You're not a wartime consigliere.
Are we ready to talk about the reveal at the end? I mean, we kind of been jumping around. The
only thing I want to add about the O'Brien thing was it felt like a TOS story to me again, because I feel like he's somebody that's been there forever, like a Sulu or a Uhura, and then all of a sudden we finally get a little focus on him and we get all excited.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I also think it's ironic that he's talking about not wanting to kill people after just a week ago he killed a Vulcan ambassador. Sorry.
I mean, he didn't do it. And she wasn't dead.
Yeah. Right.
But I like your point. The Captain Maxwell, yes, let's talk about him. Played by the great Bob Gunton.
Yeah. He looked very familiar.
Shawshank Redemption, Daredevil, 24.
Was he the warden?
Yes.
Yeah.
Real Pains. He's got so many credits. If you don't know who he is, I'm sorry. Like he's most people I would think know who he is. This is his only Trek credit, but I couldn't have named. He doesn't have any Seinfeld credits.
I could have named him, but I knew. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was like, does he have a Seinfeld credit? But
no,
he does not.
No,
but he's got a lot of other ones.
Yeah, so he does have a straight out revenge story. Mm-hmm. I mean, he gets real mouthy when he's talking to Picard, and he's like, your office smells like bureaucracy.
Yes. Oh, the turbolift Cardassian who brought up
turbolift that took a full 2 minutes to go 6 floors.
He brought
that
up
really bothered me.
He brought up the
deck 6, and it's like, is it ever going to get there?
They were on like deck 42 at the time.
No, they weren't. They were on deck 1. They were going from deck 1 to deck 6. It was ridiculous. I swear they passed 40 floors.
The numbers are misleading. My point in bringing that up, he mentions how impressive Picard is, and I love Picard in this episode so much. This is another great showcase for him, really. Just the idea of having someone who can make these kinds of decisions, can be that committed to keeping the peace, and can still not. He's savvy enough to not have the wool pulled over his eyes by the end of that, and still keep his eyes on the prize, so to speak, as far as preserving peace. But he's not going to let this guy walk away. Let go. What was the
Golmasat?
Yeah, Golmasat. He's not going to let him just walk out of this scot-free. We need to have a conversation about this. We did our due diligence. This is what we think might have happened here. And
at the end, where he basically was like, Maxwell's right. He just didn't handle it right.
And so, and
we'll be watching you.
This aspect didn't let the audience off the hook either. Yeah. It would have been so easy for us to go, this captain was just crazy. He's out of his mind. He was this. And
that's where I think it took a TOS idea, the crazy captain, and evolved it into something complex and interesting and neat. I mean, the fact that the moment where Picard decided to give the Cardassians the prefix codes to the Phoenix, talk about a weighty moment. That was one of the few weak points, though, the fact that the warship was still destroyed and the prefix code did them no good. Right. But it was kind of for nothing. But the fact that Picard was willing to hand it over was, man, that was powerful stuff. Can you imagine Kirk being like, yep, here's the prefix codes to the Klingons for a Starfleet ship? I can, like, in Star Trek 6. I can't before then.
There's a joke I was going to make earlier about Kirk, and I don't know if we've ever actually really seen evidence of him being like a cowboy captain or this rogue necessarily. I mean, to this extent of doing something that would be like, I'm going to start a war because I believe this is what's going on. However...
I'll reference Balance of Terror. This will be the last time.
Okay.
He wrestles with whether they should follow the Romulans into the neutral zone. So, I mean, as much as later he's kind of a shoot first, ask questions later, or at least that's the rep he has. But in that episode, especially, he's like, "Man, I don't know if we should do this." And Spock's the guy who's like, "Well, let's think about this logically." He's like, "Okay, you're right. Let's do it."
I was going to say Maxwell needs a Spock. I think if Kirk was Maxwell this episode, he would have gotten the evidence and he would have been justified, and then he would have blown him up.
Well, yeah, or I think Kirk would have been like, Scotty, get us there faster than those other ships can get there, and let's make this happen.
The thing that made me think of that was just that conversation you were alluding to earlier, where Maxwell came to him and he was approaching him like, we get it. We're frontier captains. We understand what's going on. And it was like, you might be thinking of Kirk, not Picard.
Yeah, right.
But that's the jokey way of putting it. Picard has been in plenty of action. We've seen that.
Well, and Maxwell brings up the Borg and stuff to throw at Picard. Like, you understand because you've been to war. You've seen this ugliness. O'Brien blindly defending Maxwell went a long way to me giving him the benefit of the doubt, honestly, because I feel like O'Brien's got good judgment. I don't think Maxwell deserves to be put up there with Picard, where O'Brien's like, I served with the 2 finest captains in Starfleet.
Yeah, right there. Yeah, I was like, come.
No, I was like, no. No, but
I was glad that Picard, when they brought up Maxwell, wasn't like, I served with him. I went to academy with him or whatever. I'm glad it wasn't another one that he was buddies with. It was O'Brien, obviously, but still. We
need some connection to, I guess, do that.
Right.
Benefit of the doubt.
It was interesting they gave this story to O'Brien instead of one of the leads.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate it, but it felt a little odd to me. We've got 9 lead characters, and you hardly use most of them in this episode. It could have been Geordi. It could have been, Riker. It didn't have to be O'Brien.
Let's go like behind the scenes with that then. I mean, do you know if they've been planning to do Deep Space Nine at this point? Maybe they needed to.
At this point, we're still 2 years out from DS9, but Roddenberry did develop the idea for DS9 before he died, and I think we're less than a year away from Roddenberry's death. So my guess would be, without knowing for sure, they would be having preliminary discussions on DS9, and maybe they were like, "Hey, O'Brien would be a good character to send over. Let's try him out on a larger story." I don't know. I'm pulling it out of my butt, but that would make sense. This could be about the time they started thinking about it. I like Massett too. Like when his officer oversteps with the computer terminal, he's tough and he sends him to the quarters. And I feel like he and Picard have a bond. He is trying to pull the wool over Picard's eyes to a certain extent, but I felt like he also respected Picard and got to know him a little bit. And they did have at least for the moment, a united mission they were trying to do.
And I feel like the open computer policy has changed on the Enterprise for the good. If that guy was like snooping around, all he had to do was go in his quarters and pull everything up.
Yeah,
it's true. And then walk into Janice Rand's quarters and sexually assault her.
Well, let's go back to last week then, because that's
Janice Rand wasn't sexually assaulted last week.
No, about the open policies. When we had T'Pel talking to Data about that was great for the purpose of establishing that people can't just walk around and go, like, give me this information. And like the way she covered it.
Did you approve that Picard allowed Maxwell the dignity of retaining his command on the voyage home? Because to me, that was a police officer on paid administrative leave while they investigate his murder of civilians.
Yeah, I wrote down, is it risky letting him go back to it's risky letting him go back to his own ship, isn't it?
Yep.
Edit. Yes, it is. Yeah.
Whether it's risky or not, whether he'd just gone straight to the starbase and did what he was supposed to do, I don't believe he deserved that.
I agree.
It felt like privilege.
Yeah. I agree. I completely agree.
I think that, it for the purpose of the story, I think we needed to see how far gone he was.
Yeah.
There was a rational discussion that was had there, and it felt like it could have ended there, honestly. Yeah. And I think we needed to have that, like, he's ready to go this far. Yeah. We needed to just forcibly take him in. And there's so many complexities here that's hard to get my head around.
The complexity of the characters and the situation are why at the beginning of this episode, said I really, really like this episode. I want to rank it high. We're not there yet, but I want to rank it high.
I'm conflicted about the end of the episode, which I think is good. And that's, because I was like, I don't know how I feel about this ending. And I don't mean that I don't know how I feel about all the people involved in the ending. And I think that's a good thing. But one of my thoughts throughout the episode was, is anybody else on the Phoenix?
Well, so I assumed that was for budget, and that's why we didn't see a bridge, because it would have to be a different bridge than the Galaxy class, because it wasn't the Galaxy class. But I like the design of his office, and man, they fully decorated his office.
It looked to me like he was in a cubicle at Wright State University, which is where I went to college. It looked like he was
no, like he had the model of his ship. He had a lot of touches in there.
He did. But yeah, it made me think he was the only person on board. He didn't want them to realize it. He was the only one left.
Well, I think the rest of his crew was giving him some space after what was going on.
That makes me think of a different point that I just thought to write down now about the fact that there are other people on this entire ship.
Yeah.
Because it would have been easy if he had been in some kind of really overpowered shuttle to just blow him out of the water immediately.
Right.
But you have to remember, he goes back to his ship and they've got like this entire Starfleet population on this ship that are helping him out. And you can't just, hold them all similarly accountable, right? They didn't really spell that out necessarily until the end when they're saying the first officer is taking control, but he's giving orders to a bunch of other people who probably don't deserve to die necessarily for what he's doing.
Yeah, and that's my alternate episode. I'll jump to that while we're here. Is what's going on aboard the Phoenix? That's my alternate episode, because then that's the cat and mouse game really going on here, and I want to know what's going on with those guys. What are they thinking? Like, like are they like, he's our captain? Yeah, we're gonna do this, or are they like, I'm not sure if this is the best. What's going on over there?
Yeah.
So that's my alternate episode, and
my alternate episode would be torn between that or on a bigger budget show. I think we would have seen flashbacks to what happened with O'Brien and Maxwell back in the day.
Yeah, that was also interesting. And I know that I feel like they made an allowance for it, because I felt like those Cardassian ships blew up too fast, but they kind of referenced like, these guys aren't super armored. They're not.
The supply ship wasn't, but he blew up a warship too.
Yeah, which to me.
But they did mention the Cardassian warships aren't as advanced as Starfleet warships.
Yeah.
And so I said, DS9 is a Cardassian station. We'll get to see their technology close up, and they are not as advanced as Starfleet. It was Tarek Noor, and Starfleet renamed it Deep Space Nine. But it is a Cardassian-built station that's been around for some decades.
It's got a lot of leather on it.
It's a Cardassian design, it's cool because it's the first Star Trek show that's not set on a Starfleet vessel. It has a very different design to it.
So going back to the idea of how much latitude that they gave Maxwell.
Even just confining him to his quarters after he gave up too.
I think the purpose of that, letting him go back to his ship and trying to give him the benefit out of walking him back, which, showed some character in Picard's part. But I think it also let us explore some of the things that we would have been asking about. The audience, the armchair captains at this point, we're going to be going, what would have happened if we'd let him do this? What would have happened if blah, blah, blah. And it lets us see this is what he was going to do. And he needed to be stopped. The loss of force would have been justified at this point. That would have been so difficult if we had let them blow up, have to actually destroy this other spaceship entirely because of what we were just saying. This is a crew of other people who were just following orders at this point.
Well, I thought it might come to that, honestly, at one point in this episode.
Well, if you have his XO come over, and then maybe you can get some of that perspective without being on the bridge of the Phoenix.
Yeah.
I know that takes the episode some different places. But
this could have been a 2-hour movie.
Yeah.
It really could have been.
I agree.
We've talked a lot about O'Brien, but I want to mention his professionalism of, as loyal as he is to Maxwell, he can set that aside and be completely loyal to Picard, and even helps Picard against Maxwell. Not even before he beams over. Like, he's on the bridge and he's going to give him all the information he has on Maxwell. And like, he knows where his loyalties lie, that he can be loyal to the captain, but still complete his duties objectively. I appreciated that a lot.
I like the in the RPG world, the idea of there being like a lawful neutral, what that alignment would be. It's just it's good when you see people actually do it right, and you would hope for more of that in real life in certain situations.
So I did think the song was clunky, but O'Brien's final conversation with Maxwell and bringing up the song and bringing up Stompy, of course, a fun nickname. That was a very moving and emotionally retching scene in my mind.
Yeah, I thought so too. I thought, and the delivery of the line, I'm not going to get out of this one, am I?
Yeah.
Because we rarely see Starship captains in that position. I mean, Kirk's, he doesn't believe in the no one scenario. And so I thought that was really cool. And it leads to the clean, not so clean ending. So, and I guess while we're there, because my other two notes are just dumb notes, for lack of a better term. So if Maxwell was right, and so they just did it for Picard's doing it to maintain the peace, but is that the right thing?
So I think it was to maintain the peace. I also think because they hadn't gathered the evidence, they hadn't done it the right way. They hadn't gone about it the right way at all. Mm-hmm. I think at this point he has to be like, hey, we see what you're doing, stop it, or there's going to be trouble, was the best way to handle that.
Yeah.
By time.
Yeah.
At the time.
And I guess that suggests that, I guess Maxwell, what happened, his fate is complicated as well.
Yeah. And we'll get to see in Deep Space Nine the perspective of people that were enslaved by the Cardassians, like in a major way over the course of the series, not a random episode here or there. We have lead characters that suffered under Cardassian rule, and we'll get to see that they're weak. And at this point, like, the Federation could go in and wipe out the Cardassians, but they don't. And if you understand that power imbalance, then Picard's actions of just watch it are way more justified than if you think they're equals, like a Klingons or something,
right. Mm-hmm.
Which they're not. Starfleet could wipe out the Cardassians if they wanted to.
And I guess, as we've talked about it, I think you guys have kind of already answered my question, but even if Maxwell is right, that's not the way to go about it.
Right.
Yes.
What he did is obviously not the way to go about
it. Going back to current events and accountability and all kinds of other things like that, you would like to think that people would understand that these kinds of standards should be in place for a reason. Yeah. You shouldn't have the power or invest a single captain or officer with the power to just create a full-scale war on a whim, or even if he feels that there is justification for that, why wouldn't you go back, get justification, go through the proper channels and have this so people can go, hey guys, don't do this. We see what you're doing. We have proof.
Yeah.
We've got you. Yeah. Don't do it. Instead of just like creating a war out of it. And
there's a line at the end of this episode where they say, oh, loyalty doesn't come easy to people. I'm like, really?
Right.
Because we've seen plenty of loyalty of Starfleet officers and stuff. Seems like it comes pretty easily to me.
Yeah.
I could be wrong. The last thing I want to mention is Admiral Hayden shows back up, played by John Hancock. He was in The Defector last season. This is his second and final Trek appearance, but it's the same actor, same character.
Yeah.
That's fun. I like that continuity.
Yeah. He dies in 92, so.
That's probably why he did not return again. I didn't think he was a particularly great Admiral, but I like the continuity of seeing an Admiral we've seen before, in my opinion.
I love him on Family Ties. He was always great on Family Ties.
Yeah. Okay, who was your annoyance of The Wounded?
Mine was the snooping Cardassian. When he gets brought up, they're like, "Why did you do this?" He's like, "I don't know." I don't know what he said exactly, but it's essentially, "I don't know. I just thought I should." It's like, what? Now to go to your quarters. Get out of here. Go jump into the sleep pod and get out of here. Yeah.
The character Glenn is the rank. Glenn Tell. I was going with the same one. I think he was the least developed and the least likable of the three Cardassians.
Yeah. It's the lunkhead.
I liked the one he talked to in the bar better.
I think it was the guy at the bar.
Okay, because that was I liked that. I liked that interaction. I liked that feeling of this is just a normal person who wants to bond over. We're both scientists. We're both engineers. Let's talk some shop. Mm-hmm. I don't want to be at war either. And if it's the other guy, then
Darrow was that one.
It allowed. I mean, the purpose of doing that was to. I think it was to give us a hint as to what was going on, because the interaction with
Massette.
Yeah, that was that tip off. Like, what the F are you doing here? You're gonna give us away over something this petty.
Yeah,
we're here to keep things smooth. Yeah. What are you doing?
Yeah,
and that little bit of confusion of like, what? Aren't we supposed to be doing subterfuge? Yeah.
Wasn't I supposed to do that? I thought.
So are you going with the same guy, Keith? For your
I guess I can't get anywhere else right now. I feel like there could be some other things. Honestly, I'm tempted for Brian only because of clinging to that sort of prejudice before he got to do the breakthroughs. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. No, it's with the same guy.
I just had two more fairly quick notes, probably. They mentioned silent running, which I looked up. It's an actual nautical term. where somebody turns off their sonar or whatever, so you can't track them, kind of thing. When they're in 10 forward, and then the guy tells O'Brien, "Can I buy you a drink?" "Oh, I don't know." Blah, blah, blah. And he's like, "I'll have an ale." And I'm like, it's good to know in the 24th century, people still order beers like they do in the 21st century in movies and TV. "I'll have a beer." "All right, coming up." Don't need any specificity. Don't even tell me it's a light beer. At least in this point, he said an ale, but I was like, come on, make up an ale. Make up a 24th century ale.
It's plausible to me that you could have a default replicator setting to yourself of whatever brand you've chosen, or that they don't bother specifying unless you really get in there and go, "I programmed this for me," something like that.
They're just going to give him Michelob as default. That's
right. I would have loved it if he'd said, "You know what? Give me a Rolling Rock." And just the idea that Rolling Rock is still producing all that from Latrobe, Pennsylvania.
That would be a whole rights issue and everything. And I guess if they made up a brand, then you'd have to explain what that made up brand was. And that takes screen time you don't need to take. So there's no better way to do it.
I just say he orders it, whatever, Sturgeon Ale, and they don't even say what it is.
He could have just said house beer or something. That house beer might have been
better. Or whiskey neat.
That too.
And then he'd get the well version.
Right.
Sure.
So that he got the well ale. It would a fun opportunity to say like Enterprise Ale or like LaForge Ale. Some like somebody on board created something, and
I guess I give him
nobody orders LaForge Ale. Nobody.
I give it tastes like somebody who can't see made it.
Oh God! No, this is what should get us letters.
Yeah,
Crush.
It's like the Cuban crepes.
I'm sticking with the holographic dancer.
Okay.
Jane Sabet.
Keith?
Sabet.
Sam, I suppose.
Sticking with the ops officer?
Yeah.
I mean, I could have gone Masset if he didn't have that stupid hair.
Yeah.
And I was tempted to go Keiko. I was tempted to go Keiko, but she's feeding her husband rice and seaweed and turning up her nose at cheesy potatoes, so I can't abide. So, I'm going to go with O'Brien. I liked O'Brien a lot in this episode. I'm doing O'Brien.
Yeah.
Ranking the episode. Let's start with Best of Both Worlds Part 2, better or worse? I want to go higher.
I felt like after watching them last night, I liked last week's episode more, but I think I've changed my mind. But
I definitely like this better than last week.
Yeah, I wouldn't fight you. I wouldn't necessarily fight you going above Best of Both Worlds Part 2. I know that was the lesser of the Best of Both Worlds. I mean,
that's why it was number 2.
That's right.
Sequels are always inferior unless you're talking about Wrath of Khan.
What's above that?
Reunion.
Number 1 is
Family. I wouldn't go as high as Family, even though I thought this was really strong, because Family really served a number of different characters well. But I would probably put this at 2 or 3. It would break our streak if we knock Klingon out of the second place, because it's been Klingon in second place all the way across the board. But there are Klingon episodes coming up that could be second place episodes. We'll see.
Best Both was 3.
Yep.
Oh, I could go above that, I guess. I mean, it's difficult for me to move the Borg down for anything, but the introduction of the Cardassians, and I think the interpretation holds up pretty well going forward. So
yeah, I think so too. So if we're going above Best of Both Worlds, are we going above Reunion or not?
I wouldn't, but
for a guy who doesn't like Klingon, used to not like Klingon episodes, I'm really having a hard time with this.
That's because those were original series.
Yeah, TOS episodes. Klingons. Come on, it's this is
TOS Klingons got good in the movies.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I mean that's closer to like TNG Klingons, which I think are set the standard. That era of at least
I didn't like the first few TNG Klingon episodes either, but I guess I didn't like Klingons when I'm coming around.
Star Trek 6 is a heavy Klingon movie, and I really like it. So
they also killed my son. I'm gonna go above.
Above Reunion?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Wow.
Okay. Are we staying below Family?
Yeah.
I kind of could go either way on Family, honestly. Okay, we'll put this at number 2. That's fair. I am absolutely fine with that.
Wow.
I thought as soon as I finished watching it, I'm like, it's got to be up there.
That's bold.
Next week, This sounds like another TOS episode. Devils do. While answering a distress call, Picard finds himself not sure of exactly who he's dealing with, but he's sure he's not dealing with the planet's version of the devil, as she claims to be.
Oh, boy. Oh,
boy. That's my first reaction as well.
What's in last place?
Episode. We'll see.
What's in last place so far this season?
Until then, live long
and peacefully, and
make sure you have horns in your costume, because that's gonna be like the selling point. It's got to be just like red horns, a ponytail, and just
and a goatee, a really bad goatee.
Yep,
like a Joker's Wild Joker goatee.
It's All Been Done presents
Who's Got the Time?
It's too hard for me to remember what actually happened in Best of Both Worlds at this point.
They got Picard back. He's not a Borg anymore.